I like to pack very lightly when I go traveling, and since I'm going to MagicCon Chicago soon, I don't want to bring too many decks. So there's always that struggle of which deck should I bring and how many decks should I bring. Because if I'm playing games with a lot of people, I want to make sure that most of those games are good games and that the power levels are matched. This is where the 75% theory comes in. Basically, it's an old deck building philosophy where if you make your deck about 75% as strong as it can be, then you'd be able to hang with most power levels. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily true or if it holds water today, but there is a deck that I always do like to bring that can usually hang with most power levels. And that is my Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. And Tana the Bloodsower as the partner just for the colors. But basically, I try to build this deck as a copy deck, so that whatever it is that my pod is trying to do, I can try to do what they're doing as well. If they're running jank, I could match that jank. If they're running powerful cards, I can also try to match those powerful cards. And because the deck is always trying to copy what others are doing, it always plays very differently. But I try to copy it better. Like, one of my favorite things to do in the deck is have Mirror Dragon on the field and just double everything on my board, and since I was copying my opponent's stuff, I get to do what they're doing, but twice as much. Now, I tried really hard to keep it as strict as a copy theme as I can. So the deck didn't really run any removal unless it was on theme or it could copy someone else's removal spell. So Sublime Epiphany had a bounce effect, but it could also copy a token that I controlled, which is on theme. But I found it very hard to rely on my opponents to deal with the threats and not have anything to deal with it myself. But also, over the years, they've printed some removal spells that kind of help with the deck. This does give them a permanent back, but if it's a big threat, it could be something that I could end up copying later on. But as I learned more about the layers, I found effects like these very interesting. Because even though the creature loses all abilities and becomes a frog, if I end up copying that creature, I end up copying the characteristics of that creature from layer 1. Meaning, I end up with a copy of that creature before it changed to a frog. I also wanted to do the same thing with the ramp. But as you can imagine, there wasn't a lot of ramp that was on theme. And the deck was very mana hungry since most clones are 4 or greater. So I settled for a bunch of Wood Elves or Farhaven kind of effects. Which honestly, in the early game, I don't mind making a ton of copies of those. I also tried to apply the same thing for board wipe, so Evacuation was nice because it could reset my clones. But man, sometimes some things just have to go, so I had to make some concessions here. Similar deal with card advantage. Sometimes I would get some card advantage, sometimes I wouldn't. So I included some stuff that would help me with that I don't mind copying myself. This deck has been one of my favorites to bust out in a pod, but I don't know if I've overdone it with the power of the deck. What used to be a deck where I copy all my opponent's stuff and do silly little things has now been a lot more of me copying my own silly little stuff. I may try to tweak it again to be more of its original kind of idea and concept of where it can be able to hang with any deck of any power level. Because now sometimes it just kind of feels generically powerful. But I have somewhat recently built a Grazilax clone typal deck, which kind of does what I originally wanted in the first place. Maybe I just run this as my 75% deck. I don't know though, I kind of want to restore this deck to its former glory. If you want to check out the deck list, the link should be somewhere on my page to my Mox field.